Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Inshallah, we're going to be covering the essentials of Tajweed. The first thing I want you to remember is, as Allah said in the Qur'an, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وقال اركبوا فيها بسم الله مجريها ومرساها إن ربي لغفور رحيم. Allah is telling Nuh alayhi salam, the Prophet, he said, embark upon the ship in the name of Allah as it sets out and as it anchors. So we need to begin this with the name of Allah. Do this for the sake of Allah and in the name of Allah. Make dua to Him and supplicate to Him as you begin. And you do not know where this journey of yours, as you're pursuing any form of knowledge, you don't know where it will end. So Bismillah, seeking the best of ends as well. And next, remember, Urkud bi rijlik, as Allah told Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam, who was sick for many years and finally made dua to Allah. Allah did not immediately heal him. He first told him, Urkud bi rijlik, which means stamp with your foot. So Ayyub had to make an initial effort, at least this expression of some form of effort. So as you're trying to learn to recite the Qur'an, remember that you make dua to Allah, as we said, Bismillah, but you also need to make an effort. And here I'm going to recommend that, generally you would want to learn directly from a teacher. But another way of doing it, when you don't have access to that, is to try your best to learn the basic rules and then to listen and to practice as much as you can. And that's the effort that you need to make. Okay, and along with these two ayat, let's cover two miscellaneous rules. So you see here, وَقَالَ ارْكَبُوا فِيهَا. What is on this word? Irkabu. The first letter is this alif that has this thing on top of it, which is hamzatul wasla. And when you see this symbol here, if you are starting from a previous word and you're continuing on to the word that has this at the beginning, then basically ignore this alif and use the pronunciation, the sound of the previous letter. So this lam has a fatha on it. So قَالَ ارْكَبُوا وَقَالَ ارْكَبُوا. You're just pronouncing this fatha here and going straight to the ra. Now, if you're beginning on a word that begins with this alif that has this symbol on it, then how do you pronounce it? You'll have to look at the next letter. The next letter has a sukoon. So then look at the following letter. The following letter, if it has a dhamma on it, pronounce this alif as a dhamma. But if this letter has a fatha or a kasra, then pronounce this alif as a kasra. So here the letter has a dhamma, so pronounce it as urkul. Urkul. Here. Urkul bi rijlik. Now let's say we're starting on this word. This letter has a fatha. So we're going to pronounce this as a kasra. And here we go to the third letter, it has a kasra. So we also pronounce this as a kasra. So here, irkabu, irkabu. And then here, kasra, so pronounce this as a kasra. Irji'i, irji'i ila rabbiki. So first, just covering the basic rules with regards to this hamzatul wasla. And then next miscellaneous rule, remember, when you're reciting the Qur'an, if you're stopping on a word, either at the end of an ayah or in the middle of an ayah because you've lost breath or something like that, then do not pronounce the harakah on the last letter. This fathatain goes with this alif, right? So do not pronounce the fathatain, just pronounce the alif. Kathira. Not kathiran, but kathira, if you're stopping on this word. Let's say you're stopping on this word, fihi. What do we say? وَيَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ فِيهِ? No, we would look at the last letter, it has a kasra on it. Drop the kasra and just pronounce the ha. وَيَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ فِيهِ. فِيهِ. Next, when you're learning Tajweed, you learn what's called مخارج الحروف, which is where the letters come out from with regards to your vocal apparatus. That's something that you would really want to try to learn from a teacher if you can. You could also try to learn it from some, in-depth videos we have online, which I could recommend. But if you have a basic understanding of reading Arabic, maybe you took a course in college or something like that, then I'm just going to cover some, key forgotten rules in that regard. So number one, let's cover the letter Jim. Arabic speakers will often pronounce this as a soft Jim. They will say ja'a. In the word ja'a, they will say ja'a. But this should not be soft in the Qur'an, it should be sharp. It should be pronounced ja'a. Next, the letters ha and ha. Ha comes from your chest. Ha comes from your throat. So when you're saying ha, do not constrict your throat. When you're saying ha, constrict your throat. These three letters, dhal, tha, and dha, to pronounce them properly in the Qur'an, you need to extend your tongue, the tip of your tongue, past your upper teeth. Dhal, tha, dha. The letter Dad is probably the hardest letter in Arabic to pronounce. But to do it properly, make sure you bring at least one of the, so look at the back of your tongue, the sides of the back of your tongue. Bring at least one side to the inside of your upper teeth. Dad. Okay, next we're going to be covering tafkhim and tarqiq, which means thickness or heaviness and lightness. And there are some letters which are always pronounced as heavy, and some which are only sometimes pronounced as heavy, sometimes as light. And we'll cover those here, inshallah. So here there are 7 letters which will always be pronounced heavy. Kha, sa, da, gha, ta, qa, dha. This heaviness is kind of a rounding of the mouth. And you can see it when you try to pronounce these words. Khatama, sabr, ضلالة, غافر, طارق, قادر, ظلم. So these 7 letters should always be pronounced with this thickness. Next thing to remember is that if you have an alif directly following one of those heavy letters, the alif itself should be pronounced heavy. So this is not sabir, it is sabir, sabir. This is not ghafir, but this is ghafir, ghafir. Now remember that this only applies if the alif directly follows the heavy letter. So here the alif is not directly following the dot. So this should not be pronounced dalala, it is pronounced dalala. Next, there are 2 letters which sometimes have this heaviness of tafkhim. These letters are lam and ra. The lam is easy, it only is heavy in one word, which is the word Allah. But it is not always heavy in Allah. It is heavy in the word Allah if it is preceded by a fatha or a dhamma or a long alif or waw. So here we treat this alif as having a fatha if we're beginning on the word Allah. So we say Allahu. Here, the first alif in Allah has a hamzatul wasla. If you remember, we ignore it if we're not beginning on it, and we look at the previous. The previous is a long alif. So ala Allahi. So before the lam in Allah, we had a long alif, so this is heavy lam, ala Allahi. Here we have a kasra, so this is lillahi, make it light, lillahi, not lillahi, but lillahi. Here, Allahumma, Allahumma, by the way, this also applies to Allahumma, it is like Allah. So here in Allahumma, we're preceded by this kasra, because again, this alif here has hamzatul wasla, ignore the alif. We have a kasra here, so say qulillahumma, not qulillahumma, but qulillahumma. Next is ra. Ra is sometimes heavy and sometimes light. The first thing we need to do to figure out whether it is heavy or not is look at the ra itself. If the ra itself has a fatha or a dhamma on it, make the ra heavy. If it has a kasra on it, make it light. So here, these 2 are heavy, and this one is light. So ar-Rahman, ru'ya. And this one is light, so this is rizq. Rizq. Fatha, dhamma, heavy, kasra, light. Raziq, ruh, and riha, riha. This is light, these are heavy. Okay, now if the ra does not have a haraka on it, meaning it has a sukoon on it, then we need to look at the letter before it. Look at the letter before it. If the letter before it has a fatha or a dhamma, make it heavy. If it has a kasra, make it light. So here, there's a fatha before it, so we make the ra heavy. Marji'ukum. There's a dhamma before it, so we make it heavy. Qur'an. There's a kasra before it, so we make it light. Fir'aun. The same applies to the corresponding long vowels. So fatha makes it heavy, so alif also makes it heavy. Dhamma makes it heavy, so waw also makes it heavy. Ya makes kasra makes it light, so ya also makes it light. Now I know these ra's don't have sukoons on them, but if we're stopping on a word, we treat the last letter as having a sukoon because we're not pronouncing the haraka, as you remember. So pretend these ra's have sukoon. This ra is preceded by an alif, so make the ra heavy. An-nahar, an-nahar. Now the ra should not have excessive trilling in Arabic, by the way, excessive rolling of the tongue. But in any case, an-nahar, the ra is heavy. At-tur, the ra is heavy. It's preceded by a waw. Basir, the ra is light if we're stopping on this ra. Now what if we're continuing? What if we're continuing after this word? So in that case we pronounce this haraka, this un. Because this un is one of the heavy harakat. We said the heavy harakat are fatha, dhamma and kasra. This also, by the way, applies to fathatain, dhammatain, kasratain. We make this ra light if we're continuing. Basirun. But if we stop on this, we treat the ra as having a sukoon. So we look at the previous letter, which is the long ya, basir. So that's tafkhim and tarqiq, heaviness and lightness. Some letters are always heavy, some are sometimes heavy, like the lam and ra. The next set of rules is that regarding al-mad, which is a very big rule in Tajweed. It will take you a long way, inshallah, if you learn it and try to master it. So mad is elongation. It is elongation of the three long vowels in Arabic. What are the three long vowels in Arabic? They are alif, waw, and ya. Now, when alif, waw, and ya are pronounced as long vowels, if they are preceded by the corresponding haraka. So here we have fatha with alif. So this is pronounced as a. Here we have dhamma and the waw. So this is pronounced as u. Here we have fatha alif, a. Kasra ya, e. So when you have a long vowel preceded by its corresponding haraka, it's pronounced as the long vowel. So this is not kitab, it is kitab. This is not tukrimun, this is tukrimun. This is al-insan, this is al-yatim. Now, in their basic form, these long vowels are lengthened to a length of 2 units, which is going to be roughly 2 times the length of a haraka. But to get the exact, amount of lengthening that is needed, I recommend that you just listen and practice recitation as much as you can to get a feel for how long these vowels should really be lengthened. In any case, this is kitab, tukrimun, and insanu, and yatima. Now, just make note of the fact that in the Qur'an you also might see these symbols, which you should just treat as a long ya. And this symbol you should treat as a long waw. So before this ya, you have a kasra, kasra ya. Here we have dhamma waw. So treat this as a long ya. Bihi, not bihi min athamarat, but bihi min athamarat. Rabbihi, not rabbihi kalimat, but rabbihi kalimat. And then innahu huwa at-tawwabur rahim. And one other thing to note, if you have this big circle sukoon on top of an alif, you should basically ignore that alif completely. So this is irkabu fiha. This is wama ana min al-mushrikeen, not ana min al-mushrikeen, wama ana min al-mushrikeen. And this is ji. Okay, so now we need to learn, when do you lengthen these three basic long vowels, alif, ya, and waw? When do you lengthen them past their basic length of 2 units? The first place that you do that is when one of these long vowels is followed by a hamza. Hamza. So here we have alif followed by hamza, alif followed by hamza. Here we have waw followed by hamza. Here we have ya followed by hamza. When one of these long vowels is followed by a hamza, you lengthen it to 4 units, twice its basic length of 2 units. So this is not sawa'un, this is sawa'un. This is not ala anfusikum, this is ala anfusikum. This is not qu anfusakum, this is qu anfusakum. And this is ji'a. So lengthen these long vowels to 4 when they're followed by a hamza. Now there are different types of this exact rule. For example, there are some different technical differences when the hamza is in the same word versus when it is in the following word. And there are different options that the reader has. But to keep things basic and simple, we'll keep the rule all one. If it is followed by hamza, lengthen the long vowel to 4. Now this also applies if we have these symbols that I mentioned before. Remember, this is a waw, this is a ya, this is a ya. So عذابه أحد يستحي أن به إلا. So lengthen it to 4 because it is followed by a hamza. Okay, the next place where you're going to lengthen these long vowels past their basic length of 2 units is in examples like this. So we have the long vowel preceded by its corresponding haraka, right? We have the alif preceded by fatha, ya preceded by kasra, waw preceded by dhamma, which just means that it's going to be pronounced normally, like ma, mi, nu. And then if you have that followed by a letter with a sukoon, now I know that these noons don't have a sukoon on them, but remember, if we stop on this word, we pretend that the last letter has a sukoon. So if you have that followed by a letter with sukoon, lengthen that long vowel also to 4 units. It is also allowed to lengthen to 6 units or to keep it at 2 units, but to keep things simple, we'll just say 4 units. And when you choose a rule, when you choose an amount of lengthening that you're going to do in Tajweed, you have to keep it at that level for the duration of that recitation. So here, this will be 4 units. Not Ar-Rahman, but Ar-Rahman. And then Al-Alameen. And then here we have Yuqinun, becomes Yuqinun. These become a length of 4 units. And then the next rule is, it applies to ya and waw. If you see a ya and a waw with a sukoon on it, preceded by a letter with a fatha, here we have a letter with a fatha, and then a ya with a sukoon. Here we have a letter with a fatha, and then a waw with a sukoon. And then following this red that I have here, you have a letter with a sukoon. Again, these don't have sukoon actually, but we're stopping on this word, so we pretend there's a sukoon there. What do you do to the ya and the waw? You lengthen them to 4 units as well. Now again, there's also the option to lengthen to 6 or to keep it at 2, but remember, to keep it simple, we're going to say 4. So make this ya 4 units long. So هذا البيت becomes هذا البيت. من خوف becomes من خوف. So فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. So 4, a length of 4. The next area that you would lengthen long vowels is when it's followed by a letter with a shadda on it, or by a letter with a sukoon on it, which is intrinsically part of the word. So this sukoon is intrinsically part of this word. So it applies here. So here we have an alif followed by shadda. You must lengthen this alif to 6. Here we have an alif, a long alif, followed by a lam with a sukoon that is intrinsically part of this word. You must lengthen this alif also to 6. So ad-dallin becomes ad-dallin. And here we have al-ana becomes al-ana. So these become a length of 6 units. And the last type of med we're going to cover, it applies to those separated out letters that you see at the beginning of some surahs. For example, Surah Al-Baqarah begins with Alif Lam Mim. Surah Maryam begins with Kaf Ha Ya Ain Sad. So these are those separated letters which have a type of med. Now there are technical rules that explain why certain letters are lengthened more than others, but to keep it simple, we'll just learn that these 5 letters need to be kept at 2 units long. Ain is made 4 units and all others are made 6 units. And the perfect example to practice this with is the beginning of Surah Maryam, because it has all of these. We have a Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad. Kaf is 6. Ha, Ya are 2, because they are of these 5 letters. Ain is 4. And Sad is also 6. So this will be pronounced as Kaf, Ha, Ya, Ain, Sad. 6, 2, 2, 4, and 6. So those are all the types of med that we're covering. We covered the basic length of these long vowels, which is 2 units. We covered how they're lengthened to 4 when they're followed by a hamza, and how they're lengthened to 4 when they're followed by a letter with a sukoon. And we covered also the rule with regards to ya and waw, when they're preceded by fatha and followed by sukoon. And then we covered when they're followed by shadda or sukoon in the same word, and also the mad with regards to the separated out letters. And next are the rules of noon with sukoon on them. The rules of noon with sukoon. The rules of noon with a sukoon on itself. This is called noon sakina. And these rules also apply to tanween. Tanween are fathatain, kasratain, and dhammatain. It also applies to the tanween because you notice at the end of fathatain, kasratain, and dhammatain we have this noon sound as well. So an, in, and un, and with a noon sound. So the following rules apply to the noon sakina and to the tanween. So the first rule is very easy. It's called idhar, which means when the noon sakina or the tanween is followed by one of these 6 letters, just pronounce it normally. So this noon has a sukoon on it, even though it's not written, and it's followed by a hamza, which is one of these letters. This is pronounced as man amana. Man amana. The noon is pronounced fully. Here we have tanween followed by ha, which is one of these. Here's alimun hakim. Pronounce the tanween fully. The noon at the end of the tanween, pronounce it fully. The next is idgham. And idgham applies to these 6 letters, when the noon sakina or tanween is followed by one of these 6 letters. These 2 are pronounced without something called ghunna, and these 4 are pronounced with something called ghunna, which we'll cover when we get to these 4. But first let's do these 2, the lam and the ra. So if you have a noon with sukoon or a tanween followed by a lam, then what you do is you drop the noon sound and replace it, just merge it with the lam sound. So waylun likulli becomes waylul likulli. Humazatin lumaza, because there's a tanween followed by a lam, becomes humazatil lumaza. And then here we have min. Noon has sukoon on it, and then it's followed by a ra. So you drop the noon sound and merge it with the ra. So instead of min rabbi, we say mir rabbi. Mir rabbi. And to help you out, in the Mus'haf, in the Qur'an, you'll often see the lam and the ra written with a shadda to help you remember. So that's the first type of idgham, without the ghunna. The second type of idgham is with ghunna. So if you have noon sakina or tanween followed by one of these four letters, then you also drop the noon sound, like we said, merge it with the following sound, but also make this ghunna sound. And this ghunna is a nasal humming quality. So min wara'i becomes min wara'i. So min wara'i. There's this ghunna sound. غلام وكانت. Drop the noon sound at the end of the tanween, merge it with the waw, and make a ghunna. غلام وكانت. And here we have min يوم الجمعة. Drop the noon sound, merge it with the ya, and make a ghunna. Mi yawmi. Mi yawmi. عن نفسي. The noon is one of these letters, right? So عن نفسي becomes عن نفسي. شاهد. Tanween followed by mim, which is one of these letters. شاهد من. And then tanween, mim. خير منها. So this is the second type of idgham. You drop the noon sound from the noon sakina or the tanween, merge it with the following letter, and make this ghunna, this nasal humming quality. That's idgham. So we covered idgham, and now we have iqlab. Iqlab means changing. So here we're changing the noon sound into something else. And this only happens when you have a noon sakina or tanween followed by the letter ba. When you have that, you change the noon sound into a light mim sound. So instead of min ba'di, make the noon into a light mim and make that ghunna. This also has a ghunna, this humming nasal quality. So we say min ba'di. Here we have noon sakina followed by ba. So la yumbadhanna. The noon becomes like a meme, and you have that ghunna humming quality. Makanin ba'id. So we have tanween followed by ba. Makanim, makanim. So we make a meme sound. Makanim ba'id. So that's iqlab. Noon sakina or tanween followed by ba. Make a light meme sound and make a ghunna. And the last rule that we'll cover for noon sakin and tanween is called ikhfa. Ikhfa happens when you have noon sakin or tanween followed by any letter other than the ones we already covered. So other than these 6 letters, these letters of idgham, or the letter of iqlab, which is ba. So if noon sakin or tanween is followed by any other letter, then we do ikhfa, which means hiding. So we hide this noon sound as we're making the sound of the following letter. So what you should do is, instead of fully pronouncing the noon, prepare your mouth and your vocal apparatus for the following letter. In this case it's qaf. So as you say the noon, prepare your vocal apparatus for the qaf and make a ghunna as well. So we also have ghunna here. So instead of min qablihim, say min qablihim. So we see that we prepared our mouth and our vocal apparatus for the qaf, and we made that ghunna sound. So here, instead of man kafara, man kafara. Man tawalla becomes man tawalla. So we prepare our mouth for this tap, which means we move our tongue forward to the tap position and then make that ghunna sound. Kitabun kareem, kitabun kareem. Antum, antum. And then ansar becomes, prepare your mouth for the sad as you're saying the noon. So ansar. So that's ikhfa, when you have noon sakin or tanween followed by any letter other than the ones we covered for the other rules. And one other thing to note here is that if you have ikhfa, if you have the noon sakina or the tanween followed by one of those heavy, thick letters, the tafkhim letters, which we covered earlier, if you remember. If the noon sakina or tanween is followed by one of those thick letters, then the ghunna sound itself, that nasal sound, also becomes thick. So if you notice, when we said min qablihim, it sounded different than when we said man kafara. So min qablihim, the ghunna sounds deep. The nasal sound sounds deep. Man kafara, the nasal sound does not sound deep like when you're doing the qaf. Ansar, the ghunna is deep because sad is one of those heavy letters. So that's ikhfa. Next, we'll cover the rules that apply to meme. And these are very simple. They have names and they have technicalities, but just to keep it simple, we'll just give 2 examples to cover the 2 major rules. So if you have meme with sukoon, the sukoon is not written here, but it's there, followed by another meme, then just merge the meme sounds and make a ghunna sound. That's rule number 1. So here we say fi qulubihim marad as fi qulubihim marad. And the second rule is if you have a meme with sukoon followed by a ba, then you make this meme into a light meme sound and you also do a ghunna. So tarmihim bihijara becomes tarmihim bihijara. So those are the 2 rules of meme that we want to cover. Very simple. And the final thing we'll say regarding noon and meme is also very simple, which is that when you have a noon with a shadda on it or a meme with a shadda on it, you're going to pronounce them with that additional ghunna sound. So innaka becomes innaka, and amman becomes amman. And those are all the rules of noon and meme that we'll cover, inshallah. And I recommend that you just listen to recitation as much as you can in practice to just get a feel for how this ghunna should be done properly. And the last rule we'll cover is qalqala, which is also a very simple rule. Qalqala refers to echoing or reverberation. And it applies only when you have one of these 5 letters with a sukoon on it. And if you have one of these 5 letters with a sukoon, you need to pronounce them with a little bit of this qalqala, this echoing or reverberation. So we'll just give some examples, inshallah, and then we'll be done. So Surah Al-Falaq has a lot of these qalqala examples. So here we have Birabbil Falaq. The qaf needs to echo a little bit. Falaq, falaq, falaq. Instead of falaq, we say falaq. And just intuitively, it's very hard to pronounce this letter without that echoing. So that qalqala will be there. And of course, there is a kasra here, but since we're stopping on the word, we pretend it has a sukoon. Hasidin idha hasad. The dal is one of these letters, right? And it has a sukoon because we're stopping there. We pretend there's a sukoon. So echo the dal a little bit. Hasidin idha hasad. Hasad. And then here, ba with sukoon. Ba is one of the letters, right? So, not abna, but abna. Abna. And then finally, qaf with a sukoon. Qaf is one of these 5 letters, right? Has a sukoon on it. So not khalaqna, but khalaqna. Khalaqna. The qaf echoes a little bit with that qalqala.